Hey guys, MizzeeOH here of Man in Black Reviews, author of columns such as Horrifying Musings of the Fourth Kind, to discuss a film that I've recently seen for the very first time that not many people seem to talk about, and it's pretty understandable. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. I'm not alone, though. I have Gary with me, aka Shadow from Man in Black Reviews, as well as Fight Evil, a horror site that Man in Black Reviews in general and its members are pretty closely affiliated with. And he's also a fellow horror reviewer, so he'll be discussing this utter train wreck of a movie with me.
Why, hello everybody.
Now, just as a note, this isn't at all scripted, except for a couple of loose notes he and I made to bring up and discuss, so you can say that I personally don't have much experience with podcast-type things like this. I'm more of a scripted reviewer, so be gentle. Gary, I'll start off with a question for you. I know you saw Halloween 3 a while back, and like me, you didn't know about Michael's absence, so you didn't like it that terribly much, but I know you just saw it again the other day, and of course you were aware going into it this time that Michael wouldn't be in the film. So I'm curious, since I've only seen it once, without knowing about the no Michael thing, and kind of being shocked about it because no one gave me any warning, was it better to go into it knowing that, or was it still terrible?
Well, going into it and knowing what to expect, it's definitely, I wouldn't say better, but at least you're more prepared for it, so you aren't going to criticize it as much as you would for the reasons why you would have criticized it for the first time. Having said that, though, I'd still say this wasn't that great of a movie. It just seems sort of like your typical, get in, get out horror movie that somebody just tried to make for, I guess, money.
Pretty generic, nothing really that creative about it.
Yeah, so, from what I remember, the budget was like $2 million or something, and it made $14 million.
Yeah, I actually have the Wikipedia page up for it right now. And the budget was $2.5 million and only made $14 million, so even though there was a profit from it, that's still pretty bad, especially for a Halloween installment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess going into it, I imagine, I'm prepared to never see this again. I will be happy if I never do. But I imagine that at least you would be a lot more prepared. It wouldn't be like a shocking punch in the face with a "what the hell is this? Where is Michael?" sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely what I experienced.
I would say that would be one of the reasons why I might give it another watch again, and that would just be for the sheer fact that I would get somebody else to watch it with me, and I would just look at their face as they realize that Michael Myers is nowhere in this movie at all.
Yeah, because, it's funny, when I put the movie on, because like I said, no one gave me any warning, because I even said that to Bill, and for those of you who don't know him by first name basis, that is Man in Black on Man in Black Reviews, and he said that he didn't tell me just because he assumed that I knew, but from the very beginning, it's like it wasn't really a Halloween type movie, so I was kind of confused as to what's going on. It's like, it went 10 minutes into it, and I was like, okay, this has to have to do with Michael somehow. They're really going creative with this plot. Wow. That was like 40 minutes in, I was like, okay, I guess they're really building up to him. Then it was like an hour and 20 minutes in, I was like, just screw this. This sucks.
Yeah, no, when I had first seen it, oh geez, I don't even remember when I say it was years and years and years ago. But I think I finally lost hope that he wasn't going to show up probably a good 3/4 of the way into the movie. I was still trying to hold on to that hope, but I just gave up after a while.
Yeah, of course they throw you a bone by having him sort of make a cameo in a couple of scenes, at least the Halloween movie, because of like the TV scenes. So it's like a movie in a movie, Inception, sort of. But I don't know, that didn't really satisfy me at all. In fact, because I didn't know the whole no Michael thing before watching it, it sort of pissed me off even more.
I was about to say, yeah, it'd probably be more of an insult than tossing someone a bone just because you're going in there expecting Mike, and then the next thing you know, nothing happens at all. You get that little, I guess, it was a commercial, pretty much, of Halloween 1, I think it was, pretty sure.
They're reminding us that the other movies were better.
Yeah, and that's basically the extent to which it's related to the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have heard, though, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that the main guy, Dr. Dan Chalice, thank you, Wikipedia, that he is in the future movies, but I don't know, because I haven't really seen any ones afterwards. Yeah, I know.
You know, I don't remember off the top of my head, just because it's been so long since I've seen anything past number 3.
I wouldn't be
I
surprised.
want to say
though.
yes, though.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he did make, like, some sort of cameo, if only to reference that, yes, there was a Halloween 3, even if you want to forget it.
Well, I can check that up on IMDb right now, so it's no big deal. But one of the other interesting things that I thought was how it has sort of, I guess cameos would be the best way to put it, but Jamie Lee Curtis apparently plays one of the phone operators.
Oh.
And
really?
Another thing is that Nancy Keys, the girl that played Linda from the first 2, well, 1 and mentioned in 2, she plays his ex-wife.
Oh, I didn't notice that, actually. That's kind of cool.
I didn't think about it again until I was watching it, and the way that she was speaking and the way that she looked, I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I can kind of place it, but yeah, I didn't notice that at all the first time. I definitely didn't notice that, and even thinking about the Jamie Lee Curtis thing. I guess as a phone operator, you wouldn't really know unless you looked up trivia for the movie.
I'm not sure if she actually had screen time. I think it was only her voice, but I'm not sure. I remember I read it in some sort of trivia. It might have been IMDb, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I was looking on Wikipedia at this, just kind of looking at the behind-the-scenes thing, and what kind of puts it in a new light is that John Carpenter originally intended for the Halloween series to be sort of individual stories. He originally intended for the second Halloween to totally wrap up Michael's story. So he wanted this to be separate from the other ones. So it wasn't just like a stupid well, it was a stupid decision, but it wasn't. It was purposeful to not have any involvement. Well,
yeah, and I remember hearing that somewhere too, and in theory, it's kind of interesting. It would kind of be like, you know, what some TV shows do today.
Yeah, like I know that the director of the movie, I don't know his... Tommy Lee Wallace, there we go. He apparently directed the first season of Twilight Zone. And it's kind of interesting because this is sort of like a Twilight Zone episode in a way. It's a little bit reminiscent of it, at least. So I can kind of see that in a way. I mean, it's a bad Twilight Zone episode, but I guess you can kind of see his style on it in a way.
So I'm looking on IMDb here, and I don't see him listed on any of the other Halloween movies past Halloween 3. Maybe I'm just accidentally looking it over or something, but...
Who? Tom Atkins?
Yeah.
So I guess they did decide to really just forget about it forever.
Yeah.
Kind of understandable.
Yeah, I think what happened is that after the first 2, everybody got so hooked on the original story that by the time, you know, everybody got to Halloween 3, they were expecting, you know, another Michael. And you can tell they decided to change their mind again and go for what worked once Halloween 4 came around.
Yeah. I mean, even if the story of Halloween 3, I mean, it was generic, but it was it had potential to be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I think that even, no matter how decent it could have been, though, since it was part of the Halloween series, people would have missed Michael, because Michael is what we think of whenever we think of Halloween. So I think no matter what direction they had gone with this third one, with it being independent from the first 2 movies, people would have probably complained about it just because of his absence.
Yeah.
I know that was my main complaint, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. This other time around that I watched it, I tried to get that out of my head and criticize it for what it is, and I would say I still have quite a few criticisms of it now that I've watched it a second time, or is it a third? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, overall, it's even, like, completely ignoring the fact that it's part of the Halloween series and it doesn't have Michael, and, yeah, it should have been, like, completely independent from the Halloween series. I think it probably would have been better received that way. But completely ignoring all that, it's really still a terrible movie.
There are quite a few plot holes and just moments where you're like, okay, why the hell is this going on? And the thing that kept...
It's so cheesy.
The thing that kept coming back to me over and over again as I was watching this is Scooby-Doo. That's basically what this is. It's a live-action Scooby-Doo without the dog. I mean,
Oh.
you get this guy who sees a mystery, instead of sticking his nose out of it like he should, instead he decides to get his gang and go exploring to try to solve the mystery, and that's basically what this movie is.
Yeah, that does actually kind of fit. Though I think a talking dog, with how weird this plot was, would probably have fit.
It probably could. I wouldn't doubt that for a minute.
The best part of it all, though, definitely was, of course, the Silver Shamrock theme. I think it was worth the whole movie being made was worth it, just so people would have that forever. And this October, I am replacing my Psycho ringtone just for a few weeks to put that up as my ringtone, definitely, because it's so catchy.
It really is. I mean, for what that movie was, how it came out, that thing is probably what's seared into everybody's minds who've actually seen that movie. I mean, they can pick it out of a lineup like in a snap, so.
Yeah, because I actually have been to the Fight Evil forum before, and I've seen various members post that sometimes. I can't remember who did or why, but I just remember thinking that it was catchy, but I had no idea where it was from. But
Well,
now I know. I can look back and think, oh, I get it. So,
now I'm not so sure if you're glad that you know where it's from, though.
yeah, I kind of liked that blissful ignorance. But yeah, a couple of the scenes in particular actually really stuck out to me as just hilarious. Do you remember when the doctor and his giant-eyed girlfriend were in the headquarters, and they were in that whole giant computer room and trying to sneak to the other side, and the way they did it was just so hilarious. They got the rack that could slide on the wheels. That reminded me so much of some cartoon.
Now we know where 007 got it from.
Yeah, how in the Looney Tunes cartoons they hide in the bushes and then they sneak, or in the trees, and they sneak around and it's really obvious that it's moved. But that reminded me of that so much. It's how could no one have noticed that?
Yeah.
It was just hilarious.
And I mean, for all the crap that we're probably going to give this movie, there are actually a few good things about it, some of the effects. I remember one scene in particular where... And in case anybody's wondering, spoilers. Obviously, we're this far in, there's going to be some. But anyway, the scene where the lady next door to them, when they're in the hotel, starts messing around with one of the chips inside of the mask, and it just blasts her in the face. And when they drag her out and you see her face, it looked fairly decent, I would say.
Yeah, for the early 80s, that actually really wasn't that bad. Even though it kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad. I've seen much worse. That wasn't that bad. And I also, one thing, if we're talking about positive things now, one thing I did like, looking back on it more now, even if it was kind of a really weird part, was the ending. It's there was this sort of appeal in that cliffhanger and the urgency that he was screaming into the phone.
Yeah.
And every child, or not every child, because one thing they don't think about is this is a stupid giveaway thing that they're all gonna watch. But if I was that old and it was Halloween night, hell no, I would not be in front of my TV watching some stupid giveaway thing. I would be out getting candy. But I kind of thought that was a decent ending looking back on it.
Yeah.
It was a bit suspenseful.
One of
Especially the way they actually ended it, not knowing whether or not they took it off the air.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I would say that's a fairly good ending for what it was. But the thing that I thought was sort of funny with that in the first place was, why in the hell were they turning the channels off just because he said so?
Yeah,
I mean, you would think the person controlling that soundboard or the video board or whatever would just be like, yeah, good one, bye.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, no one would believe him, especially as it was Halloween night. I mean, I sure as hell wouldn't have believed them. But even if it did end up in the movie to be a good thing that they did, I guess, that isn't really realistic at all. But.
One of the other things I thought was kind of funny was, in the scenes where they have the kids running around just before the thing goes off, and you see I don't know, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for those of you who don't know, I live in Phoenix, and that scene had the kids running all over the mountain trick-or-treating, and there's nobody worth going up mountains to go trick-or-treating for. I can assure you that.
Yeah,
I just thought it was funny. So I was thinking in my head at the same time, what else might they have gotten wrong for the rest of those cities? Maybe, they were recording in a bad part of Seattle or something like that. Nobody would ever trick-or-treat, and who knows?
I guess maybe they were going up the mountains to do some pranks, even though there's no one, I guess, on the mountains to prank, like you said, but, maybe they're just going to Hain, spend Halloween night there, even though they're 8. So.
Yeah, maybe. Sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Yeah.
All before the age of 10.
Those damn kids in the 80s. Jesus. It's funny. You could tell that this was an 80s movie from the intro. Just the flashing lights and the weird music. You could tell from the very first seconds that this was an overwhelmingly 80s movie.
Definitely.
More so than the other ones.
So, would you classify this almost as a sci-fi movie? I think I might, because it deals with the occult and magic.
Yeah, and like robots for some weird ass reason.
Yeah, I don't know where the hell those robots came out of. I know why they were there, but I don't know why they were there.
Like, how did he even get robots? I know things in horror movies and sci-fi movies aren't actually explained, but it was the early 80s. How did he get robots? Just come on. How did he get them? And plus, it didn't really fit with the overall movie. It was like him trying to... it's been a couple weeks since I've seen the movie, so I can't remember details, but the whole plot is him trying to kill the kids to bring back the original weird aspects of the Gaelic festival and all of that thing, the original spirit of Halloween. I guess, like I said, it's been a couple weeks since I've seen it, or a few weeks, so I can't really remember the plot details, and I was kind of zoning in and out, to be honest, so. But since that's kind of like the cult and a sort of witchcraft type thing, where do robots come in? That has nothing to do with robots. It would have made much more sense for them to be like just cult dudes. So why robots?
Yeah. And they had cult guys running around in their business suits throughout the whole movie. So
I thought those were robots though.
Were they?
Yeah, because remember.
Oh yeah, that's
the doctor.
Right. Yeah, maybe they were robots, which makes even less sense now.
Yeah, because when he broke into the headquarters, he was like beating up that one, and then eventually he beats him so hard in the stomach that there's this giant hole, and for some reason there are yellow guts inside a robot.
Yeah.
So I think they were all robots, actually.
I think, yeah, I just made that connection too.
Which is just weird.
Really is. I don't know. I think it would have made more sense to just have, like cultists or something like that.
Yeah.
Instead, we get robots.
Hey, robots are awesome, but...
And, actually, just a side note before we move on, how he was doing that whole thing with, what was it? It was one of the pieces from Stonehenge, I think it was.
Yeah, that was freaky.
When they all get together towards the end and he's talking about why, he never really does explain why. And this got me to laugh is because basically when they do ask him, they're like, well, why are you doing this? He's like, and this is almost word for word if I remember, he basically says, do I need a reason? Yeah, you kind of do if you're in a movie.
Well, I guess that's an evil villain for you.
I guess. Basically, he's not only killing off people for as much as we can tell no reason, but he's killing off his customers, so, that's just bad business.
Yeah, that is a good point. His business is probably going to fail now. He's going to go into bankruptcy.
It's bad enough he only had 3 masks to sell at once, but...
Yeah, good plan, guy. Good plan. But to answer your original question, which I don't think I answered, about whether this could be considered a sci-fi movie as well as horror, I guess it could be, if only just because of the robots.
Yeah.
So, but loose sci-fi, because it doesn't ever
I was
actually
about to say.
explain the robots or anything, how he gets them, or androids, I guess.
I think this movie might have done better if maybe it decided to try to go that route rather than horror.
Yeah, if it had gone
Sci-fi.
all the way with the sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like, have horror elements, like how Alien is a sci-fi movie, but it can be kind of creepy sometimes, too.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. That's a good point. I think it probably would have been better in that case. But I think there were just so many factors that went into this failing miserably at the box office. The fact that it's not really a good movie, that everyone was disappointed that Michael wasn't in it. So many things working against it. What's interesting is that apparently there is a reboot planned.
I was actually reading about that. I don't know if it's going to be Halloween 3 Season of the Witch or if it's going to be some brand new thing, but I was reading on IMDb they're making a Halloween 3, and I'm thinking it's supposed to tie into Rob Zombie's series.
Ugh. Good. I actually hope that it's more of like a remake of this movie. Because I actually think that, like, I know most people hate remakes, but this could almost benefit from a remake just because the original one wasn't that good, and they could make it good.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I and a lot of the people over at Fight Evil hate remakes, sometimes it's most certainly merited, and in this case I would say there's a certain merit to it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, since there were special effects in that, and of course we have much better CGI and such now, and bigger budgets, I think they could definitely make this decent. I'm sure they would change the plot around and probably make it make a bit more sense, hopefully. Yeah. But well, I think they could still make it better, a lot better.
Really? I think the beauty of what a remake this could be would be that it wouldn't really need any CGI or special effects. I mean, this movie in itself was pretty bare bones when it came to that stuff. I mean, you had some fake lasers here and there. You had the robots, but I mean...
But things like, for example, the scene you mentioned earlier with the neighbor, they could kind of, like, in the other apartment.
Oh, yeah, no, that could definitely have been improved, certainly. But.
Yeah, like, with nowadays. I agree with you that they wouldn't have to just throw in a crap load of useless CGI, but in some scenes it is needed, so it could benefit off of today's standards.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I definitely don't think that they should just throw it in uselessly. I hate it when they do that with movies, so it's just pointless. God. Actually, I did read that, speaking of pointless things like effects and such nowadays, that this Halloween 3, whether it is a remake of this or just a third installment in Rob Zombie's series, that it is going to be in, you guessed it, 3D.
Shocking.
So apparently that means that there will be special effects to speak of.
Yeah, that'll probably be another rant for another day, I'm sure.
Yeah, that probably won't turn out that well.
Yeah, I guess moving on to the rest of this movie, was it just me, or was most of the acting in this thing pretty subpar? I mean, I'd say that Atkins did a pretty good job, but that was because he basically had the main role in the movie, and that was pretty much it. Everybody else was just kind of along for the ride, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I personally didn't expect that much going into this movie, even without the whole storyline and such, because, I mean, let's face it, even though we love the older horror series like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, none of them really have good acting, per se. So I wasn't really disappointed with that. I just kind of took it in stride because I was expecting that anyway, but you're right, it really wasn't that good. The only person that was decent from was Tom Atkins, like you said, but everyone else was just, like, the main girl, let's see on Wikipedia what her name was, Ellie Grimbridge.
Yeah.
Stacey Nelkin was her real name. She was, like, I don't know. She was one of those people who, even if she was a decent actress in a certain movie, she probably would have annoyed me anyway, just because she had that annoying air to her. with her giant... did you notice that she had giant eyes? She had huge eyes.
I didn't really notice that. I'll have to give it a look again one of these years.
She had...
one of these decades.
Freaking huge eyes. Just to wrap up the acting thing. Yeah, nothing really stuck out, but I thought that it basically did its job. It wasn't any worse than I thought it would be, but it certainly wasn't better.
Yeah.
But...
and it would certainly explain why those robots acted so bad.
Yeah. One thing that kind of I found weird was the whole romance plot. I mean, you can tell... Yeah, you could tell from the very beginning, like, when the doctor is walking in the hallway and he sees her, like, crying, and she looks back, and then she just turns away, and they kind of exchange this look, that inevitably they would probably end up together, but it really wasn't built up to that terribly well. I mean, it just kind of happened out of nowhere when it did happen. I mean, they didn't really even flirt with each other at all before they got to the hotel. I mean, sure, it was that whole we're husband and wife thing, and God, it's just so shameless when movies and books and stories in general do that, because, God, I mean, how uncreative can you get before you actually make two people get together, pretend that they're together? But, yeah, it just, and plus, she was so much younger than him. I mean, I looked on Wikipedia once again, and I'm sure everyone can tell at this point that I use Wikipedia a lot. It is my source. But apparently, Tom Atkins is 24 years older than Stacey Nelkin. And I'm assuming that in the movie, she wasn't that old. She looked like she was in her 20s. Yeah,
she must have really wanted that role. Or maybe they just really wanted to give it to her, who knows.
Yeah, I mean, there was, like, a huge age difference. He must have been in his, I would say mid-40s, maybe? At least 40s.
Yeah.
And she was definitely in her 20s. Early to mid-20s.
I just thought it was funny how he had, like, what, 2 or 3 love interests throughout the whole movie. I mean, you had his ex-wife, I believe it was. I wouldn't say there's much love interest there, but there was at one point, I guess.
Mm-hmm. She would still qualify in the whole love interest thing.
Then you have his co-worker, that one, I guess, I don't know what the hell to call her, like some forensics nurse or something.
Mm-hmm. And you could tell there was something there.
Yeah, and then you had Grimbridge. So he was basically trying to go after anything that breathed throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, and then there was even, like, that one scene, and of course, this woman didn't have a big enough role in the movie to qualify completely, but, like, the black nurse that he, like, hugs and flirts with in the beginning, she would be another one. It's like, damn, dude, you're a player.
Seriously. What I thought was funny was that while he's going off on this little Scooby-Doo adventure with Grimbridge, he had promised his ex-wife that for Halloween he was going to take his kids out trick-or-treating. Well, the day comes around and sure enough, he's not there at all. There was one other thing that... oh, yeah, here it is. I had written it down in my notes. The guy, what's his name? Cochran. He was so adamant on getting this thing done. What if... and this is a big loophole here, or not a loophole, a plot hole, but what if all of the kids who had his masks decided not to watch that commercial that night because they were all busy trick-or-treating? That would have just completely blown through his entire plan, because apparently that commercial somehow activates the masks to go into kill mode.
Yeah, there's not really anything else to activate it. Even if the chip is in the masks constantly, it needs the commercial, so that is a plot hole. I think we touched on that very lightly earlier, that, I mean, at that time, because wasn't it like 9 o'clock when the commercial was supposed to come on? Every single kid who actually put out the energy to get a mask, or ask their parents for a mask, would be trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Or at least there would be such a small amount of children that would be home that it wouldn't even matter in his plans. It just would be
Exactly.
It would be pointless.
I have no idea. And then that goes into the whole, why was he doing it in the first place? Because if he was doing it, obviously there's like a certain body count, I guess, he was aiming for.
Yeah, I think he was aiming just for like mass murder.
As
and I
much
don't think
as
he was gonna
possible.
get that. He wasn't gonna get that though. That's what he didn't seem to realize. But yeah, I think that whole plot with him not ever explaining completely why he wanted to do what he did, the fact that a lot of kids would be trick-or-treating, it just wasn't explained well, so the plot itself was very weak.
A bunch of little things, but those little things, they all add up after a while.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many little things in a plot that are bad you can have before you say, okay, this is stupid. I think by the time the ending came, the movie went way past that.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe at some point they just decided, you know what, fuck it, let's just do what we gotta do.
Yeah, let's go all out with this.
Pretty much.
Let's just forget any common sense and logic.
I mean, I can appreciate that in a movie, but a little consistency is nice.
Yeah, I mean, I love the hokey, campy horror movies that you get oftentimes with the 80s and even nowadays, but I could tell that this was almost sort of trying to take itself seriously, at least as much as it could with the sort of weird plot.
Yeah.
And when you have that weird of a plot and that many plot holes, you can't take yourself seriously. That does not go with that plot.
Not really, not much at all.
The other two movies, Halloween 1 and 2, were more serious movies than this one, and that's saying a lot. Or at least, it's like, they weren't necessarily more serious movies, but you could
they were
take
taken
them more
seriously.
seriously. Yeah, if that makes sense at all. Because this one just tried so hard to be unique.
I think that might tie into the fact that it wasn't sure whether it wanted to be sci-fi or horror, just because, I mean, with, Halloween 1 and 2, I'd say it was as pretty realistic as realistic could get. Until towards the end, I suppose, when Mike was getting stabbed and shot, something like that. But, I mean, with this one, you have ties to, like I said before, the occult. You have robots, like you had said. So, I mean, I guess that sort of just disillusions people after a while, by comparison.
And the whole thing that happens when kids actually do die due to the whole mask thing. Like the bugs and the snakes.
Their head turns.
That's not realistic. So you definitely can't take that seriously. I mean, that was weird. I didn't really necessarily dislike that. It was kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, I thought
but
it was kind
weird.
of too.
Yeah, but it was weird, definitely.
One thing that I thought was funny about that was when that one dad, I forget what his name was, the businessman who sold the most masks. When that happened to his kid and that rattlesnake came out and it bit his leg, he dropped in like 5 seconds flat. I didn't know rattler venom was that poisonous.
Well, I guess it's a different case with magic rattlesnakes.
Yeah, magic rattler venom.
Because, I mean, they had to be just... The bugs and snakes had to be summoned from somewhere. And what else could summon them but magic? So... I guess the one ultimate message of this movie, though, was that Irish people are bad.
Well, I mean, there were several messages. I mean, they tried to get the kids, I guess you could say it might be anti-children.
Yeah, and, anti, like, in a way as well, anti-big business.
Yeah,
This giant company.
Definitely.
The biggest mask producer, at least I'm assuming, it seemed like in the universe of the movie, they were a huge company. So, like, you have this huge company who's now killing kids. And they're Irish.
Yeah.
Getting a whole bunch of bases here covered.
And maybe the new Halloween 3 remake will involve the Amish.
Yeah. Was there any relevance with the Season of the Witch title? I mean, technically speaking, the actual title. Was there relevance?
Well, I guess, like I said before, going back to the whole occult thing, that could be tied to witches and everything, and the fact that that time of the year was considered harvest time or whatever in, back in England, Ireland, the rest of Europe, whatever. That sort of season, I guess. So I guess Season of the Witch.
True.
I suppose
it
at
was like,
least that's what makes the most sense to me.
yeah, I mean that does make sense. I suppose if you want to try to find some meaning behind it, but there was no witch, so
Yeah.
they lied.
Yeah.
They are liars.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, besides what we had already touched on, this movie really isn't anything that great. I mean, it's not something you should go out of your way to see. Now, like I had sort of said before, if you were maybe planning on playing a joke on somebody who has never seen it before and they like the first two, and I mean, by all means, you might want to play that little prank. But overall, you could be perfectly fine without ever watching this movie.
You could easily go from Halloween 2 to Halloween 4 in the rest of the series, and obviously it would not matter one single bit. You would just be totally fine because you wouldn't be missing anything in the general Halloween story. I think I will actually try to do that prank idea on someone in the future, though, because, with my reaction, I can only picture the look on my face. Because I remember the feeling I had. It was just utter disbelief and horror. And not horror that they were going for. Horror in a bad way. I'm definitely going to try to do that to someone one day. That will be it.
And then who knows, maybe you could set up like a little hidden camera somewhere, record it, put it on YouTube.
Yeah. 'Cause, the people who know about it and experienced that disappointment firsthand, if they did, they would probably get quite the laugh out of that.
Yeah.
So, this wasn't that good of a movie. I think it probably would have been better received had it been completely independent of the Halloween series. Even though I understand what Carpenter was going for, sort of like a trick-or-treat type thing. I don't know how many people have seen that, if you haven't seen it.
Trick or treat was good.
It was amazing. But, the acting wasn't great. The best one was definitely Tom Atkins. Overall, it did its job. It didn't really stick out, in my opinion. The whole plot, though, was just a mess, whether it was part of the Halloween movie or not. It had holes in it. Things weren't explained. It was just cheesy all around. It could have been good, but they just failed on a lot of things. There was so much cheese to it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but with everything else thrown in, just terrible. So, overall, if we're gonna rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say 2.
2?
And, maybe 2.5.
Okay. Well,
maybe 3 on a good day, but no more than that. I'll go with 2.5.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, you pretty much covered everything I was going to say. I might put a little bit more emphasis on plot, at least coming from me, just because I'm more of a plot hound than anything else. But overall, I think I would probably, considering 5, let's say, being average out of 10, I would say probably about a 3. There were definite room for improvements. A lot of room for improvements. But, overall, I guess it was okay. It'd be good for a joke, but if you want something better, I guess just watch Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Not that I care too much for Scooby-Doo either, but that's just me.
This is Scooby-Doo with a little bit of forced horror, I suppose.
Yeah.
So this has been MizzeeOH from Man in Black Reviews, and with me...
Shadow, a.k.a. Gary, or vice versa, from FightEvil.com.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion, I suppose, but I personally think bashing is more appropriate of this terrible, terrible movie, Halloween 3. So, until next time, so long, everyone.
Goodbye.